There were 5 different things that we saw. We would think of these as sets of activities that we saw these projects doing that, if they were doing them extremely well, was helping to lead to the success of their project. The first thing had to do with having a dynamic and engaged leadership. Someone at the top of the project who was going to be in charge of not just setting course, but actively going out and advocating on behalf of the project, creating relationships that were going to be extremely valuable for identifying funding sources later on, and setting a tone of experimentation that permeates the entire group that's working on the project. One of the greatest challenges for any of these digital projects is what we think of as identifying a value proposition. Everyone who engages in creating digital content does it because they think it's valuable and important. So that part's not the challenge. The challenge is identifying who else, besides the team creating it, is going to find the most value in it. This becomes tremendously important when it's a question of proving impact and identifying revenue sources. So the projects that were doing a great job in really pinpointing why an audience would want to engage with this content and how they would engage with it found great success in developing their models because they built them in order to do those things. Once a digital project has been created, it certainly has some ongoing costs of some sort. That's obvious. In terms of how a project team determines how they can manage those costs, in other words, keep those costs as low as possible, a lot of the projects we saw were doing this in very, very creative ways. One of the creative ways was in seeking partnerships. What tasks can be done by someone outside more efficiently than we can do it ourselves. We saw several examples of that. And the other example that we see quite often are projects that are housed at institutions where the institution has such a wealth of resources that the project team itself is able to benefit from that. That could be staff time, it could be a donation of in-kind services from a legal team, it could be any of a number of things like that. Of course, when that becomes an important part of the whole sustainability plan for a project, then that also becomes an ongoing negotiation to make sure that those contributions and those partnerships are kept healthy, that the terms are understood equally on both sides, and that those contributions continue to come in so the project can rely on them. Once a project has figured out what it wants to do, how much it's going to cost to do it, and how much of that cost is going to be taken care of by somebody else, meaning the institution may be helping or a partner may be helping, there's always some amount of cost that remains. And the question then becomes, where can they go to generate that extra slice of funding that they're going to need to do the work they want to do? So we saw a lot of projects experimenting with revenue generation and sources of earned revenue. Some consider this a major part of their plan. Some have a subscription model that essentially covers most of what they need to do. Others are more experimental. They might be testing the waters with a sponsorship here, a little advertising there, individual donation model over here. So there's all kinds of different things that the projects were trying. The key to experimenting with revenue generation is experimenting and trying the things that fit, and making sure that the model that you try is not actually going to cost more to implement than it's going to bring back to you. A really important element of developing a sustainability plan, and actually in managing any of these projects for the long term, has to do with establishing goals and metrics for success. So when a project is being created, that might be obvious. Success might mean we've digitized what we said we were going to digitize. But it's those ongoing metrics that really stay in place in terms of what the audience needs to be, what a revenue level needs to be, what different levels of engagement look like, and measuring that, seeing how things are going, and if it's difficult to meet targets, reconsidering and reevaluating and considering a new plan. So the projects we saw that were doing really well were very tough with themselves in creating those metrics, measuring them, and then shifting course when needed.